If you want to change your life, you don't need a new year, a new plan, or a new personality. You need a new standard. Because the life you are living right now is not an accident. It is the result of what you tolerate, what you repeat, and what you've decided is good enough. And the uncomfortable truth is this. If your life hasn't changed, it's because your behaviors haven't changed. Everything else is noise. Most people say they want change, but what they really want is improvement without discomfort. They want better results while keeping the same routines, the same excuses, the same identity. That never works. Change only happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of doing something different. Until then, motivation speeches feel good, but nothing moves. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop asking, how do I change my life? And start asking, what am I willing to give up to earn a different one? Because every meaningful upgrade in life comes with a cost. Time, comfort, ego, old habits, old relationships, old versions of you that felt safe but kept you stuck. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards, and your standards are revealed by your actions when no one is watching. The promises you keep to yourself, the work you do when motivation disappears, the discipline you rely on when excitement fades. Changing your life isn't about doing something extraordinary once. It's about doing something extraordinary once. It's about doing ordinary things consistently, long after the emotion is gone. It's about deciding that who you are becoming matters more than who you've been. And once that decision is made, everything else starts to align: your choices, your habits, and eventually, your results. This is where change actually begins. Not with hope, not with inspiration, but with a decision so clear that your behavior has no choice but to follow. Radical personal responsibility is the foundation of any real change because it removes the most dangerous lie people tell themselves, that their life is mostly shaped by circumstances. The moment you accept that where you are is largely the result of what you have done, tolerated, or avoided, you take back control. Until then, you are outsourcing your power. Blaming the economy, your background, your family, your boss, or bad luck feels comforting, but it quietly traps you. Responsibility is heavy, but it is also freeing, because the moment something becomes your fault, it also becomes your problem to fix. Most people misunderstand responsibility. They think it means self-blame or beating yourself up for mistakes. It does not. Responsibility simply means ownership. It means saying, this is my life, and regardless of how it started, I am accountable for how it started. I am accountable for how it continues. That mindset immediately changes how you think, because instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You start asking, what can I do about this right now? One question keeps you stuck in the past. The other moves you forward. When you take radical responsibility, excuses lose their power. Not because the excuses are always false, but because they are irrelevant. Maybe you did start behind. Maybe you were not taught the right skills. Maybe you were treated unfairly. All of that can be true at the same time. Responsibility does not deny reality. It accepts it fully and then acts anyway. The world does not reward fairness. It rewards a fairness. It rewards effectiveness. And effectiveness begins the moment you stop negotiating with your excuses. This is uncomfortable because responsibility removes your safety net. If everything is your fault, then failure has nowhere to hide. But that discomfort is the price of growth. People who never change their lives are usually protecting their ego, not their future. They would rather be right about why they cannot succeed than be wrong while learning how to win. Radical responsibility flips that. It prioritizes progress over pride. Another reason this principle matters is that responsibility sharpens your focus. When you believe your outcomes are controlled by external forces, your energy scatters. You complain. You wait. You hope. When you believe your actions drive outcomes, your attention turns inward to the few things you can actually control: your time, your effort, your standards, and your skill set. This clarity alone puts you ahead of most people because you stop wasting mental energy on things that do not move the needle. Personal responsibility also forces honesty. You cannot change what you refuse to measure. When you own your results, you are forced to look at your behavior without stories attached. If you are unhealthy, you examine how you eat, move, and sleep. If you are broke, you examine how you eat, move, and sleep. If you are broke, you examine how you earn, spend, and invest. If you are stuck, you examine how you use your time and what you avoid. Responsibility turns vague frustration into specific problems, and specific problems can be solved. There's also a compounding effect. Small acts of responsibility build trust with yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, you reinforce an identity of someone who follows through. That identity matters more than motivation ever will. Motivation is emotional and temporary. Identity is structural. Once you see yourself as someone who takes ownership, your decisions start to align naturally. You stop waiting to feel ready and start acting because that is simply who you are. Many people resist responsibility because they think it means doing everything alone. It does not. Taking responsibility includes seeking help, learning from others, and changing your environment when needed. The difference is that you own the decision to do so. You are no longer waiting to be rescued. You are choosing the tools, people, and systems that help you move forward. If you want proof that responsibility works, look at the pattern of people who achieve lasting change. They do not talk much about what they deserve. They talk about what they are willing to do. They do not obsess over fairness. They obsess over execution. They assume that if something is not working, it is their job to adapt, not the world's job to adjust. The moment you fully accept radical personal responsibility, your life stops feeling random. Problems become projects. Setbacks become feedback. And change stops being a vague hope and becomes a practical process driven by daily actions you control. The reason most people stay stuck is not because change is impossible, but because staying the same feels cheaper in the short term. Humans are wired to avoid immediate pain, even if that avoidance creates long-term suffering. The comfort of familiar routines, familiar struggles, and familiar excuses creates the illusion of safety, but there is a hidden cost to that comfort, and it compounds quietly every day you choose not to change. Staying the same has a price, even if you never write a check for it. You pay with missed opportunities, unrealized potential, and time you will never get back. Every year you delay growth, you shrink your future options. Skills that could have been built remain undeveloped. Relationships that could have improved stay strained. Health that could have been protected slowly declines. The tragedy is that this cost is invisible while you are paying it, which is why so many people underestimate it. Growth, on the other hand, demands an upfront payment. It asks for effort, discomfort, and uncertainty now, in exchange for a better life later. Learning new skills is frustrating. Changing habits feels awkward. Pushing beyond your current limits exposes your weaknesses. That pain is obvious and immediate, so the mind exaggerates it. The result is a distorted comparison. Short-term discomfort feels heavier than long-term regret, even though the regret will eventually weigh far more. This is where most people make the wrong calculation. They ask, how hard will this be? Instead of asking, how hard will my life be if I don't do this? When you frame the decision this way, the equation changes. The discomfort of growth is temporary and often decreases as competence increases. The discomfort of stagnation grows over time. What starts as mild dissatisfaction turns into frustration, then resentment, and eventually regret. Another layer of this cost is identity erosion. When you repeatedly avoid hard things, you start seeing yourself as someone who quits, delays, or settles. That self-image becomes a prison. Even when opportunities appear, you hesitate, not because you lack ability, but because you no longer trust yourself. In contrast, people who regularly choose growth, even when it is uncomfortable, build an internal confidence that cannot be faked. They know they can handle difficulty because they have evidence. The pain of growth also has a direction. It moves you forward. You can draw a straight line from the discomfort you endure today to the capabilities you gain tomorrow. The pain of staying the same has no direction. It is circular. You feel it again and again without accumulating anything valuable. This is why people feel exhausted despite not moving forward. They're spending energy maintaining a life they do not want. Avoiding growth also creates a false sense of stability. The world does not stand still. Skills become outdated. Standards rise. Competition increases. When you choose not to grow, you are not staying in place. You are falling behind. The gap between where you are and where you need to be widens, making future change even harder. What could have been a manageable challenge becomes overwhelming, simply because it was postponed. There is also an emotional cost to stagnation that few people talk about. It breeds quiet resentment. You begin to resent people who took risks, who improved their lives, who did the work you avoided. That resentment often gets mislabeled as criticism or cynicism, but underneath it is regret. Regret for chances not taken and effort not invested when it mattered most. Choosing growth does not mean your life instantly becomes easier. In fact, it often becomes harder at first, but it becomes cleaner. Your problems become higher quality problems. You trade chaos for complexity. You trade confusion for clarity. You trade boredom for purposeful strain. Over time, the hard things you once feared become normal, and new levels of challenge replace them. When you truly understand the cost of staying the same, inaction stops feeling safe. Comfort stops feeling free. You realize that you're paying either way. The only real choice is whether you pay with temporary discomfort now or permanent regret later. People who change their lives are not braver or more motivated. They are simply more honest about the bill they are already paying, and they decide it is no longer worth it. Most people try to change their lives by changing what they do, but behavior is only the surface. Beneath every repeated action is an identity, and beneath that identity is a set of beliefs about who you are and what you deserve. Until those beliefs change, behavior will eventually snap back to its original form. This is why so many people start strong and then drift back to old habits. They are trying to act like a new person while still thinking like the old one. Identity is the internal story you tell yourself. It is how you answer questions like, what kind of person am I? And what do people like me do in situations like this? These answers operate automatically. You do not debate them every morning. You live them. If you see yourself as someone who is bad with money, you will subconsciously make financial decisions that confirm that belief. If you see yourself as undisciplined, you will look for exits the moment things get uncomfortable. Your habits are not random. They are evidence of identity. This is why habit change alone often fails. You can force yourself to wake up early for a week, eat clean for a month, or work hard for a short burst. But if your identity does not support those behaviors, friction will build. Eventually, you will feel like you are pretending, and pretending is exhausting. The mind will look for relief by returning to what feels consistent with who you believe you are. Real change starts when you decide to become someone different, not in a vague motivational way, but in a precise operational way. You stop saying, I want to work out, and start saying, I want to work out, and start saying, I am someone who does not miss workouts. You stop saying, I want to be successful, and start saying, I am someone who does hard things daily. Language matters because it reflects identity, and identity shapes behavior. This shift is subtle, but it is powerful. Identity change is not built through affirmations or positive thinking alone. It is built through evidence. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you deposit proof into a mental account. Over time, that evidence compounds into belief. You do not convince yourself you are disciplined by repeating it. You convince yourself by acting in disciplined ways until it becomes undeniable. This also means starting smaller than your ego wants to. People often set goals that are too big, fail, and then use that failure as confirmation that change is not for them. A better approach is to set standards so small that they are hard to avoid. One workout, one focused work block, one deliberate decision. The size of the action matters less than the consistency, because consistency is what rewires identity. Another important aspect of identity change is removing labels that no longer serve you. Many people cling to stories about themselves because those stories explain their past. But explanations can become excuses if you're not careful. Saying, that's just how I am, is one of the most dangerous sentences you can say to yourself. It freezes identity in place. Growth requires the humility to admit that who you have been is not who you must remain. Environment plays a supporting role here. Your surroundings constantly reinforce identity. The people you spend time with, the media you consume, and the standards around you all send signals about what is normal. If you want to change who you are, you often have to change what you are exposed to. This is not about abandoning everyone in your life. It is about being intentional with influences that shape your sense of self. Identity-based change also makes discipline easier. When behavior aligns with identity, actions feel less like sacrifice and more like self-respect. You do not negotiate with yourself as much. You do not rely on motivation. You act because that is what someone like you does. This reduces decision fatigue and increases follow-through over time. The ultimate goal is not perfection. It is alignment. Alignment between who you believe you are and how you behave when it matters. When that alignment exists, habits stop feeling forced. They feel natural. And when habits feel natural, change stops being something you attempt and becomes something you live. Most people believe their success or failure comes down to willpower. But willpower is one of the weakest tools you can rely on for long-term change. It is inconsistent, emotionally driven, and easily depleted by stress, fatigue, and distraction. If changing your life depended purely on forcing yourself to make the right choices every day, very few people would ever succeed. The truth is that behavior is less about inner strength and more about outer structure. Your environment silently shapes your actions far more than your intentions ever will. It influences what you see, what you reach for, what feels normal, and what feels inconvenient. If the easiest option in your environment is the wrong one, you will eventually take it no matter how motivated you are. This is not a character flaw. It is human nature. People tend to follow the path of least resistance, especially when energy is low. When you design your environment intentionally, you remove unnecessary friction from good behaviors and add friction to bad ones. This shifts the default. Instead of constantly fighting yourself, You let structure do the heavy lifting. Simple changes create disproportionate results. If healthy food is visible and accessible while junk food is out of reach, your eating habits improve without constant internal debate. If distractions are removed from your workspace, focus increases without needing heroic discipline. Environment design also includes your digital space. The apps on your phone, the notifications you allow, and the content you consume all compete for your attention. Attention is not infinite. When it is constantly fragmented, progress slows. People often blame lack of focus when the real issue is a high-friction environment that rewards distraction. Cleaning up your digital inputs is not about productivity hacks. It is about protecting your ability to think and execute. Another overlooked element of environment is the people around you. Behavior is contagious. Standards are socially transmitted. If you surround yourself with people who normalize excuses, complacency starts to feel reasonable. If you spend time with people who value growth, discipline begins to feel expected. This does not mean you need to cut everyone off. It means you must be aware that proximity influences identity, and identity influences behavior. Relying on willpower also creates unnecessary decision fatigue. Every decision costs mental energy. When your environment forces you to make dozens of small decisions just to stay on track, you burn out quickly. A well-designed environment reduces decisions. The fewer choices you have to make, the more consistent your actions become. Consistency, not intensity, is what drives long-term change. Many people resist environment design because it feels like admitting weakness. They believe that if they were stronger, they would not need these supports. This mindset is backward. The strongest performers do not rely on raw self-control. They rely on systems. They assume that motivation will fluctuate, so they plan for it. They build guardrails that keep them moving forward, even on bad days. Environment design is also proactive, not reactive. Instead of trying to fix problems after they occur, you prevent them from happening in the first place. If you know you procrastinate when tasks feel overwhelming, you break work into visible, manageable steps. If you know you waste time in the morning, you prepare the night before. This is not about perfection. It is about increasing the odds in your favor. Another advantage of environment over willpower is sustainability. Willpower spikes are temporary. Environments last. Once a system is in place, it continues working with minimal effort. This allows progress to compound quietly in the background. Small daily improvements accumulate into significant change over time, often without dramatic struggle. Changing your environment does not mean avoiding discomfort altogether. It means choosing your discomfort wisely. You stop exhausting yourself, fighting predictable temptations, and start investing that energy into meaningful work. When the right choice becomes the easy choice, discipline stops feeling like a constant battle. Ultimately, the question is not whether you have enough willpower. The question is whether your environment is helping or hurting you. When your surroundings are aligned with your goals, success becomes more likely by default, and failure requires effort instead of happening automatically. Most people believe progress comes from doing more, but in reality, progress comes from doing less with extreme consistency. Life change rarely happens because of a long list of goals. It happens because a small number of actions are executed relentlessly over time. When everything feels important, nothing truly is. The inability to prioritize is one of the main reasons people stay busy but do not move forward. Focus is not about adding intensity, it is about subtraction. Every additional goal, habit, or commitment competes for limited attention and energy. The human brain is not designed to pursue 10 priorities at once. When you try, execution becomes shallow. You start many things and finish few. This creates a cycle of false productivity where effort is high but results are low. Relentless execution means choosing a few high-impact actions and refusing to negotiate with yourself about them. These are the actions that directly influence your desired outcome, not the ones that simply make you feel productive. The challenge is that high-impact actions are often uncomfortable, repetitive, and unglamorous. They do not provide instant feedback or validation. That is why most people avoid them and replace them with easier tasks that look like progress. Doing fewer things requires clarity. You must be brutally honest about what actually moves your life forward and what is just noise. This honesty is uncomfortable because it exposes avoidance. When you identify the 2 or 3 behaviors that truly matter, it becomes obvious how much time you spend on everything else. Distraction often disguises itself as obligation. Relentless focus forces you to confront that. Another reason people resist doing fewer things is fear. Spreading effort across many activities feels safer. If one thing fails, you can tell yourself you are still trying. Committing to fewer priorities removes that safety net. If you fail, there is nowhere to hide, but that same focus is what gives effort its power. Concentrated force breaks resistance. Scattered force does not. Relentlessness is not about working nonstop or burning yourself out. It is about showing up even when the work feels boring or slow. It is the willingness to repeat the same actions long after the novelty has worn off. Most people quit not because the work is too hard, but because it stops being exciting. They mistake boredom for a sign to stop, when boredom is often a sign that the work is starting to matter. Doing fewer things also creates momentum. When progress is visible, motivation follows naturally. Small wins reinforce belief, and belief fuels further action. This momentum is difficult to build when attention is fragmented. You never stay with anything long enough to see results, so doubt creeps in. Relentless focus solves this by extending your time horizon. You stop judging progress daily and start measuring it over months. There is also a compounding advantage to repetition. The more you do the same core actions, the better you get at them. Efficiency improves. Resistance decreases. What once felt heavy becomes routine. This frees mental energy for problem solving instead of constant self-management. Over time, your capacity expands, but only because you first limited your scope. Many people confuse simplicity with ease. Fewer priorities do highlighting what matters. They also remove excuses. When your plan is simple, failure is harder to justify. You know exactly what you were supposed to do and whether you did it. This level of clarity creates accountability, which accelerates growth. Relentless execution also builds trust with yourself. Each day you do the few things you committed to, you reinforce an identity of reliability. That self-trust is invaluable. It reduces internal conflict and decision fatigue. You stop debating whether to act and simply act. Over time, this becomes a personal standard rather than a temporary effort. Changing your life is not about massive transformation all at once. It is about narrowing your focus until your effort becomes unavoidable. When you do fewer things but do them with discipline and persistence, results become inevitable, not because you are exceptional, but because you refuse to dilute your energy across what does not matter. If you want to change your life faster than most people, you do not start by chasing motivation or inspiration. You start by building skills. Skills are the most reliable leverage point available because they create value. And value is what the world consistently rewards. Money, opportunities, autonomy, and confidence all flow toward people who can do something useful at a high level. When your skills increase, your options expand. And when your options expand, your life changes. Many people focus on goals instead of capabilities. They want a better job, more income, or more freedom, but they do not ask what skills those outcomes require. Outcomes are lagging indicators. Skills are leading indicators. If you build the right skills, outcomes follows a byproduct. If you do not, wishing harder will not help. This is why skill acquisition is such a powerful strategy. It shifts your attention from what you want to what you must become to earn it. Skills compound over time. The effort you put into learning today does not reset tomorrow. It stacks. A skill learned once can be used repeatedly across years and contexts. This makes skill building one of the highest return activities you can invest in. Unlike motivation, which fades, or luck, which is unpredictable, skills remain with you. They travel with you across industries, roles, and phases of life. Another reason skills are transformative is that they create internal confidence. Confidence is often misunderstood as a personality trait, but it is actually evidence-based. You feel confident when you know you can produce results. That knowledge comes from competence. As your skill level rises, fear decreases, because uncertainty shrinks. You trust yourself not because you are optimistic, but because you have proof. Skill acquisition also forces focus. You cannot build real skill casually. It requires deliberate practice, feedback, and repetition. This structure pulls you out of passive consumption and into active creation. Instead of scrolling, watching, or planning, you start doing. Doing creates friction, and friction reveals gaps. Those gaps show you exactly what to work on next. This feedback loop accelerates growth. Many people avoid skill building because it is humbling. In the beginning, you are bad. You make mistakes. You look inexperienced. This discomfort drives people back to tasks where they already feel competent, even if those tasks do not move their life forward. But this initial discomfort is temporary. Every skilled person you admire was once unskilled. The difference is that they stayed long enough to cross the awkward phase. Another advantage of skills is their market value. The world does not pay for effort or intention. It pays for results. Results are produced by skill applied under pressure. When you develop rare or in-demand skills, you gain leverage. You are no longer easily replaceable. You have negotiating power. This leverage translates into better compensation, better working conditions, and more control over your time. Skill acquisition also changes how you see problems. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, you start breaking challenges into learnable components. Problems become puzzles instead of threats. This mindset reduces anxiety and increases resilience. When you believe that most obstacles can be overcome by learning something new, setbacks stop feeling personal and start feeling procedural. There's also a compounding identity shift that comes with skill building. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hopes for change and start seeing yourself as someone who builds capacity. That identity is empowering. It makes you proactive. You stop waiting for permission or perfect conditions. You look for ways to improve your output because you understand that improvement directly improves your life. Skill acquisition does not require massive resources. It requires consistency and intention. With access to information, feedback, and practice, almost anyone can build valuable skills over time. The constraint is not opportunity, it is patience. Skills do not deliver instant gratification. They deliver delayed but durable rewards. When you commit to building skills, you shift the game in your favor. Instead of relying on external validation, you invest in internal assets. Those assets generate returns long after the initial effort is forgotten. Life change becomes predictable. Not because it is easy, but because you are steadily increasing your ability to create value in any environment you find yourself in. Time is the one resource that cannot be earned back, stored, or negotiated with. Yet most people treat it as if it were endless. They say they lack time, but what they actually lack is priority. Everyone gets the same 24 hours. The difference between lives that move forward and lives that stay stuck is not intelligence or luck, but how intentionally those hours are allocated. Time leverage begins the moment you stop spending time reactively and start investing it deliberately. Most people live in response mode. Notifications dictate their attention. Urgent requests crowd out important work. Days fill up, but progress remains invisible. This creates the illusion of productivity without real advancement. Ruthless prioritization breaks this pattern by forcing hard decisions. It requires acknowledging that not everything deserves your time, even if it feels urgent or socially expected. Prioritization is not about managing time better. It is about managing focus. Focus is what turns time into results. Two people can spend the same number of hours working, but the one who concentrates those hours on high-impact activities will move further. The challenge is that high-impact work often lacks immediacy. It does not scream for attention. It requires intentional protection, or it will be crowded out by easier, louder tasks. Leveraging time also means understanding opportunity cost. Every yes is a no to something else. When you say yes to low-value activities, you are silently saying no to growth. This trade-off is often ignored because the costs are invisible. You do not feel the loss of progress in the moment, but over months and years, it accumulates. Ruthless prioritization brings those hidden costs into the open. Another aspect of time leverage is batching and sequencing. Not all tasks require your highest energy or attention. When you scatter demanding work throughout the day, you waste mental energy transitioning between tasks. Grouping similar activities reduces friction and increases efficiency. This is not about working longer. It is about reducing waste. Small efficiencies compound into significant time savings. Many people resist ruthless prioritization because it feels restrictive. They fear missing out or disappointing others. But every meaningful life requires trade-offs. You cannot optimize for comfort, approval, and growth simultaneously. At some point, you must choose. People who change their lives choose growth, even when it creates temporary discomfort or misunderstanding. Leveraging time also requires aligning your schedule with your values, not just your obligations. If your calendar does not reflect what you say matters, your priorities are theoretical. The calendar is the truth. It shows what you actually value through your actions. When you intentionally block time for skill development, health, or focused work, you turn intention into structure. Another overlooked component is reducing low-leverage activities. Not all work is equal. Some tasks move the needle. Others maintain the status quo. Others create the appearance of effort without real impact. Identifying and minimizing low-leverage tasks frees time for what actually matters. This often requires letting go of perfectionism and delegating or eliminating tasks that do not justify your involvement. Time leverage also grows as your skills improve. The more competent you become, the faster you can produce quality results. This creates a positive feedback loop. Skill reduces time required. Reduced time allows for more learning or higher-level work. This is how high performers appear to do more with less effort. They're not working harder, they're working at a higher leverage point. Ruthless prioritization also simplifies decision-making. When priorities are clear, choices become obvious. You stop debating whether to do something and start evaluating whether it aligns with your highest objectives. This reduces mental clutter and conserves energy. Clarity creates speed, and speed accelerates progress. Ultimately, time leverage is about respect. Respect for the finite nature of your life and the long-term consequences of daily choices. When you treat time as your most valuable asset, You stop wasting it on what feels urgent and start investing it in what is meaningful. Life change accelerates when your days are designed around impact rather than activity. Delayed gratification is one of the rare advantages that is entirely within your control, yet very few people use it consistently. In a world optimized for instant pleasure, the ability to wait has become a form of leverage. Most people know what they should do, but they choose what feels good now over what pays off later. This single pattern explains the gap between intention and outcome in health, money, relationships, and career. Human behavior is driven by rewards, and the brain is wired to prefer immediate ones. Short-term rewards are clear, tangible, and emotionally satisfying. Long-term rewards are abstract and uncertain. Choosing delayed gratification means choosing a reward you cannot fully see yet over one that is available immediately. That choice feels unnatural at first, which is why it creates separation. When most people choose now, the few who choose later gain an edge. Every meaningful improvement in life requires some form of delay. Physical fitness demands short-term discomfort for long-term strength. Financial stability requires saving and investing instead of spending. Skill development requires practice before recognition. There is no shortcut around this trade-off. You either pay now and benefit later, or you benefit now and benefit later. The difference is timing, not cost. Delayed gratification also builds self-respect. Each time you choose the harder option, you reinforce an internal standard. You prove to yourself that you can tolerate discomfort in service of something greater. That proof compounds. Over time, resisting short-term temptation becomes easier, not because temptation disappears, but because your identity shifts. You start seeing yourself as someone who plays the long game. One reason people struggle with delayed gratification is that the modern environment constantly hijacks attention. Endless entertainment, instant delivery, and social validation create a feedback loop of immediate rewards. This trains impatience. The longer this pattern runs, the harder it becomes to sit with discomfort or boredom. Rebuilding the capacity for delay is like rebuilding a muscle. It starts weak, but it strengthens with use. Another overlooked aspect of delayed gratification is decision quality. When you're willing to wait, you make calmer, more rational choices. You are less reactive. You do not need to escape discomfort immediately so you can think clearly. This reduces impulsive decisions that feel good in a moment but create problems later. Patience improves judgment. Delayed gratification also creates asymmetry in effort. When few people are willing to endure the boring, repetitive, and uncomfortable phase, competition thins out. This is why consistency over time beats intensity in bursts. Many start, few persist. Those who persist accumulate advantages simply because they stayed when others quit. There's also a confidence that comes from delayed gratification that cannot be faked. When you know you can delay pleasure, you stop feeling controlled by external circumstances. You are not at the mercy of moods, cravings, or social pressure. This internal control creates stability. You become less reactive and more deliberate, which improves performance across all areas of life. Delayed gratification does not mean denying all pleasure or living in constant sacrifice. It means choosing pleasure strategically. It means earning your rewards rather than escaping into them. When rewards are earned, they are more satisfying. When they are used as avoidance, they lose their value and create dependency. Another benefit is momentum. Each time you delay gratification and follow through, the next time becomes slightly easier. This creates a compounding effect. Small acts of discipline build larger capacity for discipline. Over time, what once felt like sacrifice becomes normal behavior. You stop negotiating with yourself because the standard is set. The long-term rewards of delayed gratification are not just external, they're internal. You gain trust in yourself, you reduce regret, you experience progress that feels earned. This changes how you carry yourself and how others perceive you. People trust those who demonstrate patience and consistency because those traits signal reliability. In the end, delayed gratification is not about willpower alone. It is about values. It is deciding that the future version of you matters enough to make different choices today. When you consistently choose long-term outcomes over short-term comfort, life starts bending in your favor. Not because it is easier, but because you are no longer sabotaging tomorrow for the sake of today. Consistency is the single most underestimated factor in achieving lasting change because most people confuse effort with effectiveness. They believe that motivation, talent, or inspiration will carry them, but in reality, progress is built on repeated action over time. You do not become exceptional through isolated bursts of effort. You become exceptional through persistent, predictable, and deliberate repetition. Without consistency, all good intentions are wasted, no matter how brilliant or ambitious they may seem. Consistency is often misunderstood as perfection. People think it requires flawless execution or daily performance without fail. This is false. Consistency is not about being perfect. It is about being reliable. It is about showing up repeatedly, even when conditions are imperfect, your energy is low, or results are delayed. What matters is not each individual performance, but the accumulation of repeated behaviors that compound over weeks, months, and years. One reason consistency is so powerful is that it leverages compound effects. Small actions repeated over time grow exponentially. Reading for 20 minutes daily, saving a small portion of income consistently, practicing a skill every day. These actions may seem insignificant in isolation, but over time they create a trajectory far beyond what sporadic effort could produce. Most people fail to see this because human perception is short-term, but life responds to accumulation, not intensity alone. Consistency also builds trust, both externally and internally. Others learn to rely on you when you are predictable and dependable, which creates opportunities that sporadic performers rarely receive. More importantly, you build trust in yourself. Each time you follow through on a commitment, you reinforce your identity as someone who acts, someone capable of delivering results, someone whose word carries weight. This self-trust is the foundation of confidence and long-term resilience. Another critical aspect of consistency is that it creates momentum. Momentum reduces resistance. The first step is often the hardest because inertia favors the status quo. Once you start moving and maintain that movement, each subsequent action requires less psychological energy. Habitually acting, even imperfectly, builds a rhythm where execution becomes easier, almost automatic. This is why beginners struggle so much. They have no momentum. The more consistent you are, the more effortless progress becomes over time. Consistency is also what separates high performers from a majority. Many people are motivated at the start, full of energy and enthusiasm. They push hard for days or weeks, but when initial excitement fades, they revert to old patterns. The difference between those who achieve extraordinary results and those who do not is that high performers persist long after motivation fades. They understand that consistency outweighs intensity. Short-term bursts of effort may impress observers, but they rarely produce lasting impact. One barrier to consistency is impatience. People expect immediate results and equate effort with success. When results do not appear instantly, motivation declines and action falters. Understanding that consistency is a long-game strategy is essential. Real change is often invisible until it reaches a tipping point. The work you do today may feel unrewarding, but it is laying the foundation for breakthroughs tomorrow. Another factor is discipline, which is often confused with motivation. Motivation is temporary, driven by emotion, and unreliable. Discipline, fueled by commitment and habit, sustains consistency when motivation disappears. By embedding actions into routines and systems, you reduce reliance on fluctuating willpower. Over time, the behaviors that once required effort become natural. Consistency transforms effort into habit, and habit reduces friction for future action. Consistency also acts as a truth filter. The results you achieve are directly proportional to the reliability of your actions. Sporadic effort produces sporadic outcomes. Reliable action produces predictable outcomes. This creates clarity. Instead of guessing whether you are capable or lucky, you can measure progress through repeated behaviors. The more consistent your actions, the more truth you reveal about what works, what does not, and where to improve. Importantly, consistency compounds in multiple areas simultaneously. Small improvements in health, skills, relationships, and finances, when repeated consistently, do not just add, they multiply. Competence in one area often reinforces confidence and efficiency in others, creating a web of progress that accelerates over time. Few people exploit this because they underestimate the power of everyday choices repeated relentlessly. Ultimately, consistency is not glamorous. It does not provide dramatic spikes of excitement or visible proof of effort. It is quiet, often invisible, and emotionally unexciting. Yet it is unstoppable. It is the engine that turns small, imperfect efforts into massive, undeniable results. While motivation is fleeting and talent is uneven, consistency ensures that your efforts are realized, that your work compounds, and that your life gradually transforms into the version you are deliberately building. Measuring progress with truth, not feelings, is one of the most overlooked principles of real change because most people let perception, mood, and temporary emotions dictate how they evaluate themselves. Human beings are wired to rationalize, excuse, and reinterpret events to feel better in the moment. While this emotional cushioning can provide temporary comfort, it is deadly for growth. True transformation requires confronting reality honestly, even when it is uncomfortable, inconvenient, or inconveniently slow. Feelings are unreliable indicators of performance. You can feel motivated but accomplish nothing, or you can feel exhausted and still deliver results. Most people confuse their emotional state with progress. They stop trying when they feel discouraged. Even if the system they are following is sound, they celebrate small victories that feel good but do not move the needle in meaningful ways. Relying on feelings as a compass is like navigating a stormy ocean by looking at the waves instead of the stars. You will drift off course. Truth-based measurement is objective. It relies on tangible evidence, not subjective interpretation. Did the work get done? Did the habit stick? Did the result improve? These questions are concrete and measurable. They do not depend on mood swings or self-perception. This does not mean ignoring emotions entirely. Emotions are signals, not metrics. They inform you about internal experience, but they cannot substitute for accountability or evidence. One reason people avoid truth is that it is uncomfortable. It exposes failure, gaps in skill, and areas where effort has been insufficient. Emotional reasoning, on the other hand, allows for excuses. I feel like I'm improving, or I worked hard, so that counts. While these statements feel comforting, they do not move outcomes. Facing truth requires humility, courage, and a willingness to admit that current behavior may be inadequate. Truth-based measurement also allows for clear course correction. If you track actual results instead of relying on how things feel, you know exactly what to adjust. Feedback becomes actionable instead of abstract. For example, if your goal is to increase income, feelings like optimism or fear do not create financial results. Only measurable actions like landing clients, completing sales, or improving skill metrics matter. Once you base evaluation on truth, every decision becomes an experiment, a lever you can pull, measure, and adjust. Another dimension of this principle is separating effort from outcome. People often assume that if they try hard, they're automatically progressing. But effort is not the same as effectiveness. You can spend hours on low-leverage activities and feel busy, but that does not constitute meaningful progress. Measuring progress truthfully requires identifying high-leverage metrics, those indicators that directly reflect improvement toward your goals, and evaluating yourself against them, not against how much effort you put in. Consistency in measurement also builds trust with yourself. When you track actions and results honestly over time, you remove self-deception. You learn to rely on your own judgment instead of seeking validation or consolation. This trust becomes self-reinforcing. The more accurate your assessment of your progress, the better decisions you make moving forward, and the faster results compound. Truth-based evaluation also prevents stagnation caused by false confidence. Many people overestimate their growth because they focus on superficial indicators or temporary wins. They feel good about small wins while ignoring underlying deficiencies. Over time, these blind spots accumulate, creating a gap between perception and reality. Honest measurement exposes these gaps before they become critical, allowing proactive correction rather than reactive damage control. Moreover, measuring with truth shifts your mindset from external validation to internal accountability. You stop asking whether others think you are doing well or whether your actions feel right. You start asking, did I produce the results I committed to? Am I getting closer to the standard I set for myself? This shift is critical because external feedback is inconsistent, slow, and often unreliable. Internal metrics, grounded in truth, give you immediate insight and control. Truthful measurement also accelerates learning. Every outcome, good or bad, becomes data. Failures are not moral judgments or reasons for discouragement. They are information. Success is a proof of effective leverage and a guide for replicable action. By divorcing evaluation from emotion, you create a system where progress is predictable and improvements are continuous. Finally, focusing on truth over feelings builds resilience. Life will never be perfectly aligned with your emotions. You will have days of doubt, fatigue, and discouragement. If you depend on feeling good to judge your progress, these days derail your growth. When truth is your metric, you continue forward regardless of mood, and results accumulate reliably. Over time, this resilience compounds, creating a level of consistency and effectiveness that feels unstoppable to anyone still navigating life based on emotion alone. The commitment to measuring with truth over feelings is not easy. It requires discipline, self-awareness, and honesty. But it is one of the most reliable ways to ensure that your actions produce meaningful change, that your growth is real, and that your life moves in the direction you actually want, rather than the direction that merely feels good in the moment. Changing your life is not about a single breakthrough, a sudden spark of motivation, or waiting for the right time. It is about the accumulation of deliberate choices, honest measurements, relentless action, and the willingness to do what others avoid. Every small decision, repeated consistently, compounds into outcomes that feel inevitable in hindsight. Life does not reward effort alone. It rewards disciplined execution, skillful action, and the courage to embrace discomfort while building the person capable of handling it. The path to transformation is not glamorous. but it is entirely within your control. And the moment you decide to act with clarity, responsibility, and persistence, your life stops being a series of chances and starts being a series of results.